Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into something core to CMMC compliance, the documentation. Now, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, it's known for its tech controls, right?
Hmm.
MFA, incident response plans, all that stuff.
Right, the technical side often gets the spotlight.
Exactly. But what our sources are telling us and what we see in practice is that passing or failing that assessment, it really hinges on the paper trail.
That's absolutely spot on.
Most companies, they pour resources into building secure systems, which is great. But then the system security plan, the SSP, and all the related policies,
Yeah.
they sort of treat it like homework,
Right.
a box to tick.
An afterthought, yeah, a necessary evil.
But the reality, according to these sources,
Yeah.
is completely different. Compliance isn't just about having the security, it's about proving it. Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to lay out the strategic framework for actually proving it. We're pulling out the three absolutely essential preliminary steps you've got to nail down before you even think about drafting that first official policy. This is about building documentation an assessor just can't argue with.
And that distinction you made, proving versus implementing, that's really the strategic heart of CMMC. The
Yeah.
assessor, they're not just popping in to see if your firewall is blinking.
Right.
They are there to verify that your security controls are properly established, that they're documented correctly, that they're actually being practiced, and crucially, that they're repeatable. In a maturity model like CMMC, repeatability is everything.
Repeatability, okay.
So the goal for you, the listener, is really to shift your internal thinking. You're not just writing documents to fill a binder. You're building an assessment-ready documentation system.
Assessment ready. I like that.
Yeah. And that means every artifact, every single policy, every procedure, it needs to trace directly back to actual traceable evidence. Doesn't matter if you're aiming for CMMC level 1, which is, mostly about basic cyber hygiene, or level 2, which demands that full alignment with NIST 800, 171 controls and, well, all the detailed documentation that comes with it.
Okay, let's tackle that common idea head on then.
Yeah.
Why can't I just show the assessor the live firewall?
Mm-hmm.
Walk them over, point at the logs, the configuration screen. Why does the piece of paper, the document, still carry more weight than the thing actually running right now? And what's the real cost if my documentation is weak, even if my tech is solid?
Well, what's fascinating here is it's about time and consistency. That documentation pyramid, it's designed to confirm that things are done consistently over time. Something a snapshot like looking at a dashboard right now just can't prove.
Ah, okay. Consistency.
Think about it. An assessor comes in. They aren't just looking for a firewall. They're looking for proof that the way that firewall is configured actually follows a formal enterprise policy. The high-level intent like all inbound traffic is blocked unless specifically allowed.
Okay, the why.
Exactly. Then, underneath that policy, they're looking for the procedure. That's the how. For instance, firewall admins must follow this specific change management process to update rules, and the rule set gets reviewed every quarter. Standard stuff, right?
Right, the nitty-gritty.
And then finally, they need the evidence, the actual proof it happened. That could be the sign-off sheet from the quarterly review, the change ticket for a rule update, maybe the config file itself showing the rule is active. If you miss any link in that chain, say you have the rule, but you can't prove you followed the procedure for the quarterly review,
You fail the control.
you fail the control and the cost. Often, it's a failed assessment, which means expensive remediation, delays, and potentially losing out on contracts. It's a big deal.
Wow. Okay, so that tracing, that documentation pyramid,
Oh,
it sounds like that's the core lesson. It connects the big picture intent, maybe from the execs, right down to what the tech team is doing day to day.
absolutely. And that really underscores why the planning phase is so critical. Before you even think about writing policy number 1, before you touch that keyboard, you absolutely have to get 3 foundational planning steps right.
Okay, what are they?
We need scoping, clear governance, and a solid gap analysis.
Scoping, governance, gap analysis. Got it. Let's dive into number 1, defining scope clearly. Now, for anyone working with federal contracts, this means tracking down federal contract information, FCI, and the big one, controlled unclassified information, CUI. Why is messing up the scope like the number 1 way to kill your documentation effort before it starts?
It's purely strategic, really. If your scope is too wide, you end up documenting security controls for systems that, frankly, never go anywhere near sensitive data. That's just a massive waste of time, money, complexity.
Right, documenting the coffee machine's firewall.
Exactly. But if your scope is too narrow and you accidentally leave out a system that does handle CUI, well, your entire assessment is likely dead on arrival. You've missed the point.
Okay, so precision is key.
Absolutely. And the scope definition we're talking about, it isn't just some vague paragraph in your SSP. No, you need specific artifacts. First up, detailed network diagrams. And I don't just mean showing routers and switches. They need to clearly mark out the systems, the user groups, the cloud services that are inside that secure CUI boundary, and just as importantly, which ones are outside.
So, like, if we're using AWS, we can't just say AWS. We have to point to the specific VPC or region handling the CUI. Is that where this idea of an enclave comes in?
Precisely. That's exactly it. An enclave is just a highly secured environment. It could be logically separated or physically separate. Maybe you set up your CUI processing in a specific virtual bubble, a secure CUI enclave. You need to document how firewall rules, access controls, whatever, enforce that separation from, say, your main corporate network. And documenting that clearly keeps the assessment focused, saves everyone time.
Makes sense.
And furthermore, you also have to explicitly list the systems that are out of scope, like your public marketing website maybe, and you need to justify why it's out of scope, prove it can't ever touch CUI. And here's one people often miss. You absolutely must define formal shared responsibility models for every single external vendor involved. Your MSP, your SaaS providers, anyone who touches your CUI environment. You need it documented and agreed upon who exactly handles patching, monitoring, configuration, incident response for their part of the service. No ambiguity allowed.
That feels really critical, especially with cloud services. Okay, so scoping is about drawing the lines. Once those boundaries are clear, we need the structure to maintain them, and maybe more importantly, maintain the documents themselves. This brings us to step 2. Here's where it gets really interesting, establishing governance and accountability. This seems like the difference between, a one-off project and a living, breathing compliance program.
You nailed it. Documentation, it ages like milk, not wine. Governance is the framework that stops it from going bad, stops that inevitable decay. You have to formalize who owns what.
Right.
You absolutely need a dedicated CMMC program manager. Think of them as the orchestra conductor, making sure everyone involved in compliance is playing from the same sheet music, keeping things coordinated.
Okay, one person in charge.
Well, in charge of coordination, but that program manager, they can't be the deep expert on everything, right? So you also need to identify specific domain leads.
Domain leads?
Yeah, the subject matter experts, the SMEs, the people responsible for controls in their specific area, like access control or incident response or audit and accountability. This makes sure that when, say, a procedure about vulnerability scanning gets written, it's actually reviewed and signed off by the person who runs the scanner, not just a compliance manager ticking a box.
Ah, practical ownership. Okay. And what's the administrative machinery behind this?
Workflow.
How do we prove a document isn't just written, but it's actually approved, it's official, it's operationalized?
So the workflow just defines that process. How a document moves from a draft, maybe gets reviewed by the SME, then gets a compliance check, and finally gets that management thumbs up. And the single most critical piece of paper or database entry in this whole governance piece, the one assessors always ask for, it's the document control register.
The document control register. Okay, tell me more. Why is this spreadsheet or whatever it is, why is it so vital?
Because it proves maturity. Look, anyone can write a policy down once. The register proves you are managing that policy over its entire life cycle. It lists the document's official title, who owns it now, the current version number, the date it was last formally looked at, and this is crucial, the next scheduled review date. This little artifact shows you have a repeatable, time-bound process for keeping documents accurate and relevant. That's a core requirement of the CMMC maturity processes themselves.
So if that register shows a policy hasn't been touched in 3 years, even if the tech is perfect today, it flags that your governance process might be broken. It proves non-repeatability.
Exactly. You got it. It shows the process failed. And that feeds right into needing strict change management rules. Any update, doesn't matter how small, it needs an explanation, it needs approval from the right domain leads, and it absolutely has to be logged in that register. Traceability again.
Fantastic. Okay, this is clicking. We've got our secure boundaries defined with scoping. We've built the team and processes to maintain the paperwork through governance. Now, preliminary step 3, gap analysis and baseline. This feels like where we move from defining things to actually measuring where we stand right now.
Yeah, this is where the rubber meets the road. You have to get honest with yourself. You can't just document what you wish you were doing or what you plan to do someday. You have to document what you are doing now. The gap analysis is that necessary bridge.
The bridge between wishful thinking and reality.
Sorta, yeah. For CMMC Level 2, the benchmark you measure against isn't just the list of NIST SP 800-171 controls. It's actually the NIST SP 800-171A assessment objectives.
Okay, the A version. What's the difference?
The A document breaks down each control into the specific things an assessor will actually test for. It's much more granular. So you conduct a control-by-control review against those assessment objectives to see exactly where your current policies or your procedures or even your technical setups fall short.
Ah, so the gap analysis gives you the concrete data you need for that POA&M, the plan of action and milestones.
It provides the foundation for the POA&M, yeah. You find a gap, you assign it a risk rating high, medium, low. You prioritize fixing the high-risk stuff first, obviously. You assign owners, you set deadlines for getting it fixed. Without doing this detailed gap analysis first, your POA&M is basically just a wish list.
Right.
But with the gap analysis, the POA&M becomes a real, quantifiable project plan. It tells you exactly which documents need creating, which need updating, and probably in what order to tackle them.
This really sounds like an absolute must-do. If you skip the gap analysis, you're kind of flying blind, aren't you? Just drafting policies based on a checklist instead of addressing known weaknesses.
Precisely. You're just guessing. And, if we connect this back to the bigger picture, doing these 3 planning steps properly, scope, governance, gap analysis, it prevents those common assessment nightmares we hear about.
Like what?
Like scope mismatch, where your SSP talks about securing System X, but the assessor gets there and System X isn't even part of the CUI environment anymore. Or the classic failure using generic boilerplate policy language that doesn't actually match how your specific systems are configured.
The copy-paste problem.
Exactly. When you do the planning right, the assessor asks to see, say, your access control policy. They can trace it through your document control register, check the review date, pull up the link procedure, and see that it perfectly describes the unique way your company manages user accounts, maybe even with screenshots specific to your setup. That's solid proof.
And let's just ground this in reality for a second. Our sources mention the time commitment. Even for smaller organizations, getting ready for assessment, they estimate something like 300 to 500 labor hours just for the prep and documentation. This is not a trivial task.
No, definitely not a weekend project.
Yeah.
And that time commitment really highlights why doing the planning saves you time in the long run. If you just jump into writing policies without nailing down the scope and the governance first.
You waste time.
Totally. You end up writing policies for systems you didn't need to cover, or you're constantly rewriting documents because they don't match reality after someone actually looks at them. But if you follow that hierarchy first, plan and scope, then build governance, then evaluate your baseline with a gap analysis, you make sure every hour you do spend drafting is focused, effective, and counts towards passing the assessment.
Okay, so what does this all mean? It means the road to being assessment ready. It starts way before you write word 1 of a policy. We've laid out these 3 core preliminary steps you have to achieve first. Define that precise scope around your CUI and SCI. Establish robust governance with that all-important document control register, and conduct a thorough gap analysis using the NIST SP 871A objectives as your guide.
Right. And the final, maybe the most critical takeaway for you listening is this. This whole process, it's fundamentally a test of your organization's discipline. The documentation is just the tangible evidence of that discipline. Every single statement in every document, from that high-level enterprise policy down to the detailed work instruction for, say, patching a server, it absolutely must match what you actually do in practice day in and day out. That's how you embed real cybersecurity discipline into your operations. It's not just about passing one assessment. It's about operating securely all the time.
We know it's tempting, right, to just grab security policies off the internet, change the company name, and call it done. That boilerplate text.
Yeah.
You're saying that's a guaranteed fail because it won't reflect reality. So what's the crucial, actionable step you need to take to make sure your documents are real, operational, and avoid that boilerplate trap?
The key action. Mandate a review cycle where every technical procedure is walked through and validated by the operational staff, the people who actually do the work.
Get their eyes on it.
Well, yes. And then, crucially, you need to embed proof within those procedures. Incorporate relevant screenshots from your actual systems, maybe examples of real configuration settings, snippets of log files, things that prove the document isn't generic fiction but truly mirrors your operational environment. That closes the loop.
Okay, here's a final provocative thought for you to chew on. If your documentation perfectly describes what you should be doing, according to some template, but it's not what your team is actually doing. It's not just a compliance fail, is it? Doesn't that also create a huge potential legal liability if something goes wrong? Think about how getting this documentation maturity right could shift your whole CMMC effort from being just a cost, a compliance burden, into becoming a real competitive edge built on demonstrable digital trust.